All right, welcome to today's recap. This is Christian from Hertz Tribeca Trade Group. So I'm just looking at oil moving up here. It looks like the API numbers just came out, and I think there was a drawdown of about 6.7 million barrels. So, energy companies have been getting lit up pretty decently. I guess that's a good place to kind of start. You can see energy moving up a little bit. This has really kind of been ugly. Kind of a false move higher in XLE, a move over this channel, and then you could see these longer wicks here on these candles, and very quickly we got back below the 200-day moving, not 200, the 50-day moving average, which is the purple line on my charts, and that was it basically. That was it for the bounce that we saw in energy. Maybe it's going to try to put in. I mean, I thought this might have been a double bottom. We'll see what happens here. Again, just kind of a messy space. I have just kind of been a bystander. The only thing I tried here was a long trade over here, and I noticed that it lost momentum here and got out pretty quickly. So other than that, I've really stayed out of energy. We'll talk about today's stories. We'll kind of get involved. S&P was basically just a grinding type day. Really, where things got dicey was retail. Retail XRT, the equally weighted retail ETF, down 2.7%. So really got shellacked. You look at the names that were involved in this shellacking. It was a lot of earnings names, but then a lot of also pin action on some of those names. Dick's Sporting Goods. I mean, how often do you see like three names that are down almost 20%? In one sector, so on separate things. Dick's Sporting Goods was down 23%. Advanced Auto Parts was down 20%. That was an earnings trade that we put on that we made out very nicely on. I sold call spreads in AAP, so in hindsight, I wish I would have bought puts as well. The implied move was about 10%, so there was a lot of money to be made on selling call spreads, but it looks like there was more money to be made on going short as well. So down 20%. HIBB was down 16%. Hibbett Sports, I think, down in sympathy of Dick's Sporting Goods. Then just a number of names that were down over 5%. Look at Urban. Urban actually had good earnings, and might see a little bit of a short squeeze in this tomorrow. What was revealing, you could see Urban, which was down 5%, is all the way up to $19. So big move. If you remember yesterday, what they did with an Urban was they sold puts way out of the money, put spreads, 14 and a half strike puts, not this week but for next week, 45,000 of it. I added it up for 10 cents. That's $450,000 that they earned by selling way far out of the money. So let me just check the math on that. Yeah, $450,000 by selling 45,000 out of the money put spreads for 10 cents. Not bad. Not a bad trade that someone just earned on this. Again, it doesn't expire till next week, but 14 and a half is a long way away. So nice trade there. So that was really the area that got smoked today. It was the 15th of the month as well. What happens on the 15th of the month? I very much will use my experience as a trader. When I was sitting, as a ETF trader, I knew that there was a trade that could basically happen on the 15th of the month or the 1st of the month where there's some changing around of portfolios. So, for instance, you could, if you don't believe me, you could look at the IJH ETF. This normally happens it's a reallocation between the mid caps, the small caps, large caps, and bonds. So it looks like today, it looks like there was some. We said this right off the start of the day. There was some selling pressure in small caps today, also in the mid caps. My guess was that they probably sold out of some small and mid cap exposure, and maybe went into a little bit of bonds. Bonds came back at the end of the day. They were down. They started the day down about 80 basis points. They still finished down on the day, but I think there was maybe a little bit of buying there, maybe a little bit of buying going into large caps. But here's the volume. And again, this hasn't happened in a while, but it's either the first of the month or the 15th of the month. You could see these big spikes in volume. So they may be using a different instrument, But basically what happens on these days is it can push around the market a little bit. So I really didn't do much trading today. I kind of added to some things on the dip. Used this move down in small caps, which did finish on the lows of the day, down to 80 basis points. We kind of came back here a little bit, but it got squashed. So I really think that somebody was doing a decent amount of selling in there in that group. Now, the takeaway from that is, you just be mindful of that on the 15th and the first of the month, and that's it for that trade. That's really all that they trade those 2 days, and then the next day that usually there's a chance of a reversion after that. The VIX ended down 2%. You could see that it's the VIX. The volume in the VIX is and the VIX instruments are still heightened, but nowhere where they were. You can see the VXX actually only traded 62. This is still a lot. The 30-day volume is 68. I really don't know who trades this stuff. This day trades of this stuff. It's pretty remarkable that someone would spend that much time day trading the VXX, but normally it trades 68 million shares. It traded 62 today, so kind of go and take a look at the volume. Again, the big star. I'll talk about what I've been talking about recently, and that is the amount of money that was sold, specifically or unwound, and money was gone into. You could see this. I don't think I have my spreadsheet up anymore. I don't. But just heavy profit taking on UVXY and S. I know a lot of people quote XIV. But really, SVXY is where people have been adding money to. I think it was like, again, I'm going from memory, but I think it was $400 million were added into short VIX instruments or inverse, betting that the VIX will go down. I mean, look at these inflows on this volume. So that was a trade that's been kind of carried out the last couple of days since Thursday. They really started to add to positions thinking that the VIX will go back down. So far, they've been right. This was down here when they started to do this. And you could see that SVXY, again, which is inverse VIX, is starting to get back, not back above the 50-day moving average, but reclaim the 100, and it's approaching the 50-day moving average. So that's, I think, very interesting. We talked about retail getting smoked today. Again, that XRT finished down 2.7%. A couple other areas besides that, in energy, gold miners were also down. Telecom stocks were down 2% today. That's the IYZ ETF. On the upside, you did see some things outperform. Consumer staples were up 0.5%. Utilities were up the same. And then solar companies, that's the 10 ETF, was up 1%. In terms of option activity, it was a little bit more than usual. I'm going to try to keep the option activity, for a while I was kind of, keeping a pretty good list of the option activity. So I'm just going to try to only concentrate really on, rather than a lot of the weekly stuff, which we're seeing a lot of. We're also seeing a ton of earnings still as there's less companies that are now reporting, still seeing a lot of option earnings flow. So a lot of things like, which to me is a lot of hedging for the most part, other than maybe that urban trade and a couple other things. But, for instance, one trade that caught my eye that's earnings related is Ross Stores. This name reports, I think, 817. It appears that they bought and I think they may have rebooked this, but I believe they bought a 55, 57 and a half call spread that expires on Friday, and they may have sold puts. It was rebooked to a smaller quantity, so it looks like it went up on the ask side, but I'm not so sure those were bought on the put side. So that was just one trade around earnings. Visa and MasterCard, it was one of the first trades that we noticed right off the bat. Both call buying and those. The Visa was just Visa out to a 52-week high. The Visa was a weekly call buyer. The MasterCard went out to September, but both MasterCard is on the cusp of a 52-week high as well. Apple, they've just been going after calls nonstop, so 52-week high for Apple as well. So while the major indices didn't move and small caps got pummeled, there were some names that made 52-week highs. I think Procter made one too, which I've been long Procter since we saw a lot of call activity. I believe that's a 52-week high for Procter. Coca-Cola was another name that we saw some call buying. So a little bit different names. Saw some call buying as this started to break out as well. That's Coca-Cola. This one has a little bit of resistance to get over, so I did not take that trade today. It's tough. You really have to kind of pick and choose. You can't take every trade. McDonald's caught my eye. This was earlier in the morning. A nice October 160, 165 call spread. ABO, we looked at this name. This was a very speculative biotech name, but really made a nice bounce here. It was right here where these calls went up, so went all the way through the value area. Hit this VPOC. Someone asked me the other day, they're like, I don't understand VPOCs. Basically what they do is it's where a lot of so VPOCs again are virgin point of controls. A point of control is this yellow line. What does it stand for? It means that's where a lot of volume at a particular price occurred. What makes the VPOCs interesting is it's where a lot of volume happened from this time period, but price has never returned back there. So it almost acts, price has memory to it, especially when you really start to get out of a range. For whatever reason, price likes to go back to where that there was a lot of buyers and sellers before. Once that happens, and again, it will often act as a magnet. It'll take the price up there, and then once it hits it, it just tapers off. It's like it's satisfied it, and then it reverts. We saw this last night with Nasdaq, right? Same deal on the 5-minute bar. Nasdaq took out this VPOC at about 10 o'clock. I think it was a little bit earlier than that. I think it was 8 o'clock. Yeah, 2000. So about 8 o'clock last night, VPOC was taken out from last week, and that was it. So again, magnet, we actually got a little bit higher, which can be the case sometimes. Price can overtake these if it's really strong, but you could see the reversion all the way back. So you can purchase this indicator on our website. I don't try to oversell people on things, but if you want to see these levels, they work incredibly well. I use them as basically I take profits. Like when you start to gravitate up to something and it's an area that price has not been in a long time, it's a great place to take a profit. Sometimes I won't take the whole trade off there, but I will take targets when I see VPOCs in front of you and it being taken out. All right, so that's a quick explanation about that. Other names that we saw some option activity in, again, just a lot of retail names, a lot of dip buying in energy too, which I don't even have all the energy names listed here, but a lot of dip buying on 52-week lows. Again, I try to really stay away from that. I'm not a big counter trend trader. I'm more of a trend trader. Hain, this one caught my eye. We saw calls towards the end of last week. I think it was the same strike. It was definitely out in January. So it could be something's going on with this name. It looks like somebody's accumulating a position. We talked about Coca-Cola. Mosaic, going back to the kind of counter trend type trade. This looks interesting to me because it's really gotten smoked. It's oversold. And I think it put in a hammer bar today. So again, if you're looking to play something for a bounce, they came in a couple times for Mosaic today. There was some rumors about them canceling a conference, which I don't really like those rumors because it could just mean someone has the flu if they're backing out of a conference. You never really know. True, we saw some small call buyer in that name. Clovis, which is not on this list, but Clovis saw a little bit of call buying as well as Gilead did today. Pretty light stuff. But you can see 1,100 contracts gave a little bit of bid to Clovis. Clovis is another one of those names, biotech names that have kind of gotten beaten up over the last week. That's the wrong symbol, CLVS. So right here, from earnings, it kind of sat down and has been continuing to move down. It's almost halfway through this gap. Interesting, this went back to this VPOC, by the way. Huh. So Clovis, a couple other trades that were interesting. Talked about Apple. There was a little bit of bank buying this morning. Banks did kind of revert a little bit today. They gave back some of their profits. We talked about Coca-Cola. Paychecks, some weekly calls going up. Another dip buyer in AMC, which has just been getting obliterated. Gold, we continue to see just a little bit of call buying. It's nothing really that large, but we continue to see like little orders like this. I think there was also some puts that went up too. Maybe those puts were sold. If I just look for aggressive trades, you could see, oh yeah, these went up for 2 cents. So that's noise. But this one, these calls were swept. And I think there was some Octobers. Yep, there goes some Octobers as well. So little orders like this in gold. I think gold is a really, really tough trade. We talked about this pre-market in GC. I mean, it looks to me like just a chop fest. And until, I said this in the weekend newsletter, until gold gets outside of, say, 1300, I would stay away from it on both sides. It just looks like a lot of chop. You could, until this kind of goes away, you could maybe sell out of the money call spreads and out of the money put spreads, but just doesn't look like I want to be anywhere in this trade. And again, bonds, it's like the same thing in bonds. It just looks like a lot of chop. I guess if you want to hide, if you can't hold if you're a fund and you can't hold a cash position, maybe you go into a little bit of bonds and gold as safety because you just can't have a big cash position like an individual investor can. But so that's it. So again, main story was 15th of the month. Kind of just held us in check. There was some selling in IWM and selling in selling in small caps and selling in mid caps today. So this is the stuff. This is the expertise. If you didn't really hear anybody talk about that today, this is my institutional background that I bring to our trading room. So if you're interested, our trading room is not very gimmicky. I just kind of tell you how it is every day, and we try to make money. So I don't really go. I don't try to make it gimmicky, which you see a lot of people on Twitter talk about things like, which really surprised me. But we're very straightforward. Our trading room, we're just try to put risk return in the right. Get them in the right proportions and make money. So thanks for watching tonight's video. Check us out, TribecaTradeGroup.com. We do offer half off the first month if you want to see what it's all about. Again, I provide a huge amount of information to subscribers. So definitely check it out. Half off the first month. Coupon code TTG. Thanks for watching. Have a great night.